Hello, welcome to another Look Back Machine shorty. This one is on Disneyland Paris's CinéMagique, with the director of the show, Jerry Reese.
Oh my gosh, I loved CinéMagique, and I got to work on CinéMagique for several years straight, like three years. And I think you'd seen it in France, where there had been some sort of flexible screen projection screens, and where actors would push themselves through the slice in the screen and seem to pop right out of the movie and stuff. But it was very temporary screens that would wear out and have to be replaced, and sort of course get dirty as people are touching them and everything. So, and it was usually temporary stuff. But he thought, well, what if you could do a really well crafted version that would not be the temporary thing, but be it like a beautifully done version of that kind of interactive theater with actors going in and out of the screen that's really meant to operate many times a day for many years, and just do the Imagineering sort of heavy lifting of making it beautifully engineered so that it's reliable and is always high quality for the audience. They had invited me to come in and take a look at it and start thinking in terms of directing and writing and like, what would you do with that premise? And so I got involved early on and got to be involved with the sort of the birth of that idea into its first story versions, and included getting to work with one of David Copperfield's illusion engineers, Steinmeier, I think was his name. And so I got to sit with him and say, what if we could have a magic carpet fly and we could be in the flying carpet, and then actually an usher runs up and grabs the magic carpet, and it turns out to be physical, and the actor is actually in front of the screen, and they fall on the stage, and then there's antics, and then they fly back into the movie. And we would just do all these sort of what ifs, and he was able to work out everything, and except for one. I came up with one where I went, okay, wouldn't it be cool to have in the Wizard of Oz, you have your main actor who's been swept into the world of the movies and going through all these iconic moments, and you have the tornado whipping the characters around, and you see the guys in the rowboat and the witch, and then our character gets caught up in that. And if you'd have the person pass by the screen inside the movie and then continue the arc of the circle around the tornado out above the audience's head, swinging above them, and then go back into the movie for the next pass, and just keep doing that for several revolutions, where half of the circle is out of the movie, half of the circle is in the movie. And he absolutely fell in love with it and was challenged by it and came up with a way to physically do it, but never came up with a way to get rid of the sort of the shadows of the necessary cables that might give it away. So he didn't quite figure that one out. But I presented storyboards to Eisner, and he just said, this should happen in every Disney park. This shouldn't just open in one place. This should be in every single Disney park. I love this. And so then I proceeded to workshop it, but we had to go through just a maze of rights issues. Because the fantasy is, you think you're going to see like a Chuck Workman best of movie scenes, like an homage to the world of the movies. You think you're going to see that kind of nostalgic homage. Instead, during that, an audience member disrupts the show, gets chased, actually gets zapped by a magician in a silent movie to make him disappear from the theater physically and reconstitute him inside the silent movie, where they can punch his lights out and give him punishment for the disruption of the show. And then he starts running to get away from them and trips through 60 movies before you're done, stumbling into Once Upon a Time in the West and stumbling into Titanic and Star Wars and on and on. So there were different versions of that I'd put together, and sometimes I had them. We had so many rights with issues with purchasing rights, that I did a version of the show that was just an homage to famous genres of movies. So we would do our own spaghetti westerns, and we would do our own romantic musicals and our own film noir and stuff like that. So I had even taken the route of, what if we can't get any rights? Then here's how we still do something similar, and we try to cast people in it that will make it absolutely ring true and be iconic stars that we know now. Then there was another experiment where there was just a feeling from some of the execs, like, look, we're putting so much time and money and effort into this and going to spend so much money on the rights. Well, let's make sure that we've done due diligence to the story. And so they brought in 6 writers for 6 weeks. For this period of the rewrite, they said, okay, why don't you take a break for 6 weeks and come back and we'll all regroup and hear what these other writers have come up with. So, I was not terrifically pleased to suddenly be not in the mix and have other people writing. But I thought, well, that's the process. So I came back and we listened to the results of the 6 weeks from the 6 writers. And then they turned to me and said, anything been on your mind that you want to mention? And I said, yeah, I was at a coffee shop and I was thinking about, this is going to play in France, and an iconic thing that was so charming was the red balloon. And I thought, well, what if we're in the theater and there's like a teenage girl and her little brother has a balloon and it's brought into the theater, and that becomes the disruption. You try to reel it in, it's helium balloon, you try to reel it in and you keep it out of sight. But then he keeps letting it bob up into view where it's blocking the screen, and the usher comes to try to tell them, hey, you got to keep the balloon out of people's view or else get out of the theater. And the balloon gets away and it drifts up towards the movie screen and goes into the movie. So now the balloon is in the movies. And so the teenage daughter goes running after it and she goes into the movie. So now she's chasing the balloon through all the different movies, and they're like, wow, that's interesting. So that actually became a thing where, like, the 6 writers in 6 weeks, I didn't use any of that, but they used the coffee shop notebook scribble that I had done. And we actually did a whole version of a story reel with the balloon. And we actually did a version of a physical mock-up where we could take a real helium balloon in the first few rows of the theater and let it go. And it would go into a window. It would be timed perfectly. So during Safety Last, a terrific silent movie, it would happen to dart through one of the windows when there was the right kind of camera angle to present a window in front of it. It was dart through the screen into the window. And after that, it was in the movie. And so in that famous scene where he's hanging off the clock face starts tilting, the balloon is actually drifts by him in the scene, and that's what he winds up looking at in the scene. He turns to look at something while I had him look at the balloon. So we did a whole version with that, and it worked, and it was hilarious. But ultimately, all of us came back to saying, you know what, the romance in the initial thing where the disruptive guy in the theater, that Martin Short to be the disruptor and Julie Delpy to be the actress that he meets in the silent movie. Ultimately, their romance and having her leave her silent movie to go chase him through other films, it had so much heart that we just felt like that one won the contest after all. So we did concentrate on that. And the legal department just had so many hoops to hop through. They never wanted to be faced with that again, but they did get it done for us. But I had to go do some personal lobbying for certain things. There's a scene where I wanted Martin to be swimming through Pinocchio, and he actually bumps into Pinocchio swimming underwater and then gets chased by Monstro the whale and winds up on the Titanic. And so I just love storyboarding and pitching to people and getting them engaged. And they really did not want to do that and wanted me to back off, and they wanted to write legal papers that would explain legally what they were going to do to the footage and everything. So they sent it up through the process, and Roy Disney reviewed it and just said, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to let people mess with the iconic Disney feature. Are you kidding? So I just told them, Roy, please let me go talk to Roy. I know Roy. So they're all like, well, okay. But then there was a parade, and it was like, there were like 4 people in front of me, and I was at the end of the parade, and they're knocking at Roy Disney's door. Knock, knock, knock. And the door opens, and Roy looks past all of them and goes, hi, Jerry. And all those heads whipped around. They're like, what? It's like, yeah, we know each other. So I push past and I go in and I sit down with my notebook, and then everybody else crowded in and watched. But I leafed through with Roy and showed him the storyboards. Here's what would happen. And he went, oh, that's charming. Of course I'll let you do that. I just read these legal papers and I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't want people messing with it. But he said, oh, that's charming as heck. That's like, sure, you can do that. So then we got permission and I just, so I sat with Eisner as we were dealing with our last rights issues, and I had so many things in place, including, thanks to Roy, that one. But I still had a couple missing pieces. So I had Eisner come for a review of the whole thing. So I was going to pitch the boards. And so he walks in and he looks, and I had around 3.5 walls of this big conference room. There was like only a tiny spot for the door to open, and the rest was storyboards stacked double high. And he sees all these storyboards pinned up and he goes, oh, you're not going to take me through all that, are you? And I said, yes, I am. And it's going to be fun. Here we go. And so we dove in and he stayed with me and I explained the story and we went through scene after scene, including Star Wars, including Titanic and all of that. And we got all the way to the end. And Bob Iger, by the way, was tagging after him at that time. Eisner turns around afterwards and he looks at the executives that were accompanying me on the project. And he just said, oh my God, he goes, anybody who's doubting whether they're going to give us rights, they should come have this experience. They should come have the story told to them. This is fun. So he goes, where do you stand? And I said, well, I don't have Star Wars and I don't have Titanic. And he looks at those sections and goes, man, you really need that. And I said, yeah, we do. He goes, oh, let me talk to him. So I actually got permission for Titanic and for Star Wars, and I never saw the legal papers. I have no idea how they worked it out. Just Eisner knew those guys and called them, and somehow he opened the doors, and it was just such a treat to have access to that footage. And just the only one that was kind of weird is George wouldn't let me use one of his original shots. It seemed incidental to me. It's dramatic, but it's an upshot of Darth just sort of pausing in the hallway and then moving on. He sort of felt the tremor in the Force and was like, well, you can use all this stuff you want, but not that one shot. I'm like, wow. He's like, well, you can recreate the shot, but you can't use that shot. It's like, okay. So on our website, you can see that moment where we built the entire hallway and I had my Darth and I had all the stuff and I exactly duplicated the shot. Most people look at it and go, oh, you used the shot from Star Wars. It's like, well, no, I exactly recreated it. I'm not sure why I had to, but there it is. Like 95% of what you see in CinéMagique was actually built. Very few green screen of any kind. Most everything was built. So it was just tremendously fun to be running around on those sets. And we had just a fantastic time. I remember Martin Short was so engaged with it. There's a scene where he's terrified of the water that's gushing into the hallway in the Titanic. And as he backs up, the entire wall behind him just opens up and reveals the Star Wars hallway. And I use the sort of diamond shape opening that happens in the sliding doors in Star Wars as the reveal. And I just literally did it. I had 2 sets back to back and had a door that was decorated to look like Titanic on one side and Star Wars on the other side, and just had the physical mechanism work. So as Martin Short's backing up, he trips and falls into Star Wars. And he said, I don't want to know when it's going to happen. It's like, I want you to really trip me. Like, take the mattress and don't tell me when it's going to happen. I want you to shove it behind my feet when I'm not expecting it. And don't do it at the same time over each take. Like, really surprise me. And so he just really wanted to make it sparkle and be great. And another thing that Marty did that was just, to me, so confident and brave in a way that you don't associate with, like, oh, he's a, comedic fun actor. But he did this thing that was really brave, which was the underwater footage. And granted, in the film, it's done in a sort of a fleeting few seconds, but he had to go deep. It was like a 18, 20 foot tank. And I had to be deep enough where we weren't seeing the surface. So he had to commit to being really deep. And we had divers with him, companion divers. And the diver would have his own regulator, of course, and then one on a long extension hose for Martin. And so Marty would have to, before each take, I would talk to him with an underwater speaker and prepare him for the shot. And while he's doing that, bubbles are when you breathe with the regulator, like just little micro bubbles collect on your face. It just happens. So he would have to sort of hyperventilate to a degree, whatever his ritual was, to get ready to hold his breath for a while. And he was too deep to come up to the surface. So he had to trust, my diver will hand the regulator back to me. That's how I'm going to breathe next. I'm not going to go to the surface. It's going to happen here, deep. So he would hand the regulator to his companion diver. And then the first thing is wipe all the micro bubbles away. I'd give him the thumbs up when that was successful. Then he would do the scene itself. And then he'd wave his diver over and wait for the regulator to put back in. And his next breath was that. Yeah. So that takes real trust. It takes a comfort underwater. It takes the ability to hold your breath a long time. So I had gotten together with him that morning, and I brought in all the storyboards for that segment. And I showed it to him, and I said, well, here are the different shots. And this is going to be a hard day. So what's on your mind? What would help you out the most? And he said, well, I really don't want you to get me in and out of the water a lot. I said, oh, I was going to bring you out after every shot and let you sort of relax and then get ready for the next scene. And he said, no. He said, I'll get chilly. And it's much better for me to stay in the water once I'm in the water. And so I'd rather do a few takes in a row and just stay under. And that way I won't get a chill. Says, well, that makes a whole difference. So then I reshuffled the storyboards and would try to group similar shots together. Normally, a very long, arduous day was, granted, arduous for him, but he was a trooper about it. And it was like a short day, and nobody thought that was going to happen. So I was like, we're starting to move equipment past the catering table, and there were some Disney people looking up going, what's happening? Where are you going? It's like, we're done. Like, we're heading home. What about you? It's like, what? You finished that whole day? It's like, yep, Marty got it. So I was really amazed. And then as I was done and the film was going into being cut and everything, there were certain, when a project goes into a park, there are a lot of people who have to deal with it. There's operations people in the park who deal with the flow of people and how many shows happen per day and how many minutes between shows and the throughput for the day and how that makes sense for their business model and et cetera, et cetera. And there was a movement afoot to shorten the film significantly. And that would be very difficult to do because everything is so cause and effect. The dominoes that fall are so organic that it would be really difficult to take that much time out. And the solution that was thrown at me was take all the character stuff out, take all the personality and the romance and all that stuff. We could just think of that as dead weight and just have the tricks. And I just refused. It became a real point of contention. And Eisner was called in to be referee, and he watched my edit, and he turned around to the room and said, I don't want anybody messing with this. I like this version that Jerry put together. Some people were happy. Some people were really angry. And so I was able to protect it, but I really put my neck out, and I realized that it was potentially burning the bridge to the studio because there were some really angry people that I was not just going along with. Ultimately, the show opened to great reception and won a Thea Award for Disney. And I was not invited to the opening of my own show. So I actually just flew myself and my family there and just sort of crashed the party as I could. Marty Sklar, bless his heart, he just said, if you can make it past the photographers and push your way up to the rope, I'll save a chair for you. So it was like during the actual opening ceremony, Marty Sklar had a chair waiting in case I was able to just break in. So I did. I paid my own way. My family was there. Didn't have any Disney credentials and stuff. And I had to be rude and push my way through the photographers. And I felt so terrible being the rude American to these French photographers. pushed my way up to the rope and waved to Marty, and Marty waved me through, and I had a chair to sit in. And then Eisner was like, I wondered where you were, gee. And so he starts talking to me, and I didn't tell him, well, nobody invited me, but it was just it was a weird situation to have that happen. But then time went by, the Thea Award was granted to that show, and people talked about it being heartwarming and charming and loved the romance. And so the part that I had protected proved to be valuable to the company and to the project and to its how many years it was able to last. And so when it won the Thea Award, I got an invitation, and I had been sort of just like on the far side of the moon for close to a year. And I thought, boy, I guess I burned that bridge. I'm proud of the show, but I think I had to burn a bridge to the company where I started. In my teens, I was being mentored by Eric Larson, one of Disney's 9 Old Men, and I think I just burned that bridge. But I did it for the things that Eric taught me, like storytelling and character and emotion. That's what it's all about. I protected that. Even if I never worked there another day in my life, at least I opened a good show. So I just was living with that. And then I got this call, and they said, oh, we just won a Thea Award, and you're invited to come be part of that experience, and here's your pass, and here's the table that you'll be sitting at. And so I was suddenly back there, and it was so great to see some of the people I had worked with, and it was great. Tom Fitzgerald, who I've worked with again and again, he got up and said to the whole room crowd of the people, as an executive on the project, he accepted the award for our whole team. And he didn't have to do this, but as part of his speech, he said, we're blessed to work with the best director in this business, Jerry Reese, and pointed to me at the table. And I just thought to myself, wow, I guess that we really buried the hatchet today. And I didn't say anyone who had animosity towards me to that point. I just acted like none of it ever happened, and have gone on to work with him for many years after, and we have done wonderful things together. But I'll tell you, that was a point where I just went, I have a choice of either really compromising the principles that were taught to me by the Disney veterans, and I took that risk of being the difficult one, but to protect what I thought was the audience experience and the storytelling principles that had been with the studio from the beginning. And I was so glad ultimately that paid off, but I was ready to live with it if it didn't.